I finally paid off my mortgage and painted my house a color I loved. My neighbors started a petition to force me to repaint. Days later, I found paint buckets dumped across my porch and my mailbox smashed. But an anonymous letter in my garden revealed his real motive. I'm not usually the type to stir up drama. I mind my own business. I always have. I worked for 3 decades as an electrician, mostly commercial work, sometimes residential. It was hard on the body, but it paid the bills. My wife, Melissa, was the one who made our house a home. She picked the curtains, planted roses in the front, and filled every corner with warmth. She passed away from breast cancer in 2017, and since then, the house has felt like a shell of what it used to be. After she died, I kept living in it because I didn't know what else to do. I still sat in her chair on the porch. I still mowed the lawn the way she liked, with the stripes neat and straight. I kept the place up, even if it hurt. She always told me, when we finally own this place, I want to paint it blue. A dark, strong blue, like the ocean. That was her dream. We never got to do it together. But when I made the final mortgage payment this February, just me now, I decided to honor her wish. The house was ours for real. No more banks, no more loans. I finally felt free. So I had it painted. Navy blue with black shutters, just like she wanted. Even added new numbers to the front, got the porch touched up. It looked clean. Solid. A little piece of dignity back in a life that felt like it had been stripped raw for too long. But my neighbor Rick didn't like that. Rick moved in about 4 years ago. Retired early, insurance money, I heard. From day one, he treated the street like his own fiefdom. Always nitpicking. Complaining about lawns not cut short enough, or trash cans left out past pickup. The kind of guy who waves city codes around like he wrote them. I never had real issues with him until the paint job. The morning after it was finished, I was out on the porch sipping coffee when he came walking over with that smug expression he always wears, like he's about to lecture a child. He looked me up and down, then at the house. Didn't know we were doing art projects now, he said. I ignored the jab. Just said I liked it. That my wife had always wanted it that way. He made a face like I'd said something stupid. Well, it sticks out like a sore thumb. Everyone else on the block has neutral colors. This makes the whole street look cheap. That's when I realized this wasn't about taste. This was about control. Rick liked the street to look like a catalog uniform, bland, orderly. My house broke that illusion. It had personality. Within a week, I heard from a neighbor, Anna, 2 houses down. She showed up at my door looking nervous. Said Rick was trying to get a petition going to make me repaint. That he was talking about lowering property values and preserving the neighborhood standard. There's no HOA on our street. No formal association. Just a few old families, a few newer ones. We've always handled things with a wave or a knock. But Rick wasn't knocking to talk. He was pushing papers, trying to make my house into a problem. I tried to ignore it. Figured most folks wouldn't care enough to sign. But a couple days later, I saw him on the sidewalk with a clipboard, smiling and shaking hands like a politician. When our eyes met, he didn't even flinch, just gave me a little wave. Then came the real hit. I got home one evening and saw the damage right away. Paint buckets, 5 of them, dumped across the porch steps. Not brushed or spilled, just dumped. The new mailbox I had just installed, bent backward and half ripped off the post. My wife's rose garden, trampled, crushed under boot prints. I stood there for a long time just looking at it. Like if I stared hard enough, maybe I'd understand why someone would be so hateful over a damn paint color. I called the police. They took a report, snapped a few pictures, nodded their heads. But with no cameras and no witnesses, they said there wasn't much they could do. Keep an eye out, they said. Let us know if it happens again. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch with the porch light on, holding an old aluminum bat across my knees, wondering if it would be Rick next time or one of his little cronies. But then, something changed. 2 mornings later, I was clearing out weeds in the backyard, around the garden stone by the back gate. That's when I noticed it, something sticking out from under the edge. It was a Ziploc bag, tucked carefully beneath the stone, like someone wanted it hidden but not lost. Inside was a folded sheet of paper. No name, no handwriting, just a typed message, plain black ink on white paper. He wants your house condemned so he can buy it cheap. Ask about the zoning meeting last fall. That's when everything started to click. I read that note at least 20 times. Every word felt heavy. He wants your house condemned so he can buy it cheap. I didn't even know what zoning meeting they were talking about, but suddenly everything Rick had done made a twisted kind of sense. The fake petition, the vandalism, the smug looks. It wasn't just about the paint. It was never about the paint. I started digging. First, I called City Hall. Told them I was a homeowner on Maple Court and wanted to know if there were any public zoning records or changes filed in the last year. The clerk was helpful, too helpful, almost like she'd been waiting for the call. Yes, she said. There was a proposed redevelopment plan for Maple Court and adjacent lots last October. Something about converting residential into mixed-use commercial space. But it stalled. One of the key parcels didn't respond to the outreach. What parcel? I asked. Yours, she said. That hit me like a punch. Rick had been planning something. Probably buying up homes on the block for cheap, maybe through LLCs or shell buyers. And mine was right in the middle. He couldn't move forward with the zoning change unless I sold. But I never responded to anything because I never received any notice. I asked for a copy of the meeting notes and attendee list. Rick's name was right there, representing MCR Investments. That's when I realized. He wasn't just my neighbor. He was the buyer behind the curtain. He'd started a limited liability company. Probably others too. He wanted to buy up the block, convert it, and flip it. I was standing in his way. That night, I sat in the dark kitchen with a copy of the zoning documents and the anonymous letter beside me. My whole body was shaking, not with fear, anger. The kind that comes from realizing someone's been trying to gut your life quietly, piece by piece. I didn't tell anyone right away. Not the police. Not the other neighbors. I needed to be sure. I needed proof. Because if this was going where I thought it was going, I'd only have one shot to make it stick. I spent the next 2 weeks watching him. Rick had a pattern. Early walks around the block, phone calls on the porch, meetings with a man in a silver Tesla who never got out of the car. I started documenting everything. Photos, license plates, times and dates. Then something strange happened. One of the other neighbors. Old Mr. Dorsey, retired Vietnam vet, lived alone, knocked on my door one afternoon. He'd never said more than a few words to me before. But that day, he stood there holding a small white envelope. I think you ought to see this, he said. Inside were 2 photos. One of Rick standing on my porch, holding a paint bucket. The other of him walking away, empty-handed. Time-stamped. Clear as day. Where'd you get these? I asked. Dorsey didn't smile. Just nodded toward the house behind his. There's an old security cam on my garage. Half the neighborhood forgot it's there. I didn't. Figured you'd want a copy. It all felt surreal. Like I was living someone else's life. My quiet little street had turned into a war zone. And for what? So a greedy man could shave off a few $100,000 and make a killing on redevelopment? I thanked Dorsey and started putting the pieces together. I now had motive, photographic evidence, zoning records, and a reason. Rick wanted my house, and when I wouldn't sell, he tried to break me down until I caved. But I wasn't going to cave. I was going to expose him. The plan was simple. Collect everything, then go public. Local news, the city zoning board, maybe even a civil suit. I thought I was ahead. I thought I had him cornered. But then Rick made his next move, and it wasn't what I expected. 2 days after I got the photos from Dorsey, a city code enforcement officer showed up at my door. Young guy, maybe mid-30s. He looked uncomfortable before he even spoke. Sir, we received an anonymous complaint about code violations on your property. I raised an eyebrow. What kind of violations? Porch railing not to current code, unpermitted structural modifications, something about your shed being too close to the property line, and the paint color. I laughed, but it wasn't funny. Not anymore. He walked the perimeter, took pictures, and said he'd file a report. I asked him straight up, had Rick called it in? He hesitated, then said, we don't give out the names of complainants. But between you and me, this one had attachments and references to prior case law. That's not normal. I knew it. Rick was trying to use the system to bury me. If he could get the house labeled as non-compliant or unsafe, the city might condemn it. And then he could step in and buy it cheap at auction, exactly like the letter warned. I called a lawyer. A woman named Tanya I'd met years back when Melissa and I updated our will. She looked over the documents, the photos, and the zoning files. Her face hardened by the second. This is targeted harassment, she said. And if we can prove he manipulated city processes for financial gain, that's civil fraud. But that wasn't the twist. The twist came when Tanya's assistant dug deeper into MCR Investments. It didn't just trace back to Rick. It traced back to Rick's daughter. Her name was on the LLC paperwork. She worked for a mid-level commercial developer in St. Louis, the same firm that had submitted the zoning proposal last fall. Rick wasn't working alone. This wasn't just one man with a grudge. It was a coordinated plan. His daughter submitted the commercial proposal. Rick was the boots on the ground, and I was in their way. Worse yet, we found property records showing 2 houses on my block had quietly changed hands in the last year. Both were sold under market value. Both new owners listed out-of-town mailing addresses. Shell buyers. They were flipping the block already. I called Anna and told her everything. She got quiet, then told me something I didn't expect. "I know who left you that letter," she said. It was her son, 17 years old. Saw Rick arguing with someone outside the zoning meeting last fall. Heard bits of conversation. He'd figured it out. How Rick was trying to force people out by turning the neighborhood into a liability. His mom made him promise not to say anything, but he felt guilty after seeing the damage to my porch. Everything was unraveling fast. The question now wasn't if I'd fight back, it was how. Tanya helped me build the case methodically. We gathered every document, every photo, every recorded instance of harassment. I filed a formal complaint with the city zoning board and attached every shred of proof. But I wanted more than a hearing behind closed doors. I wanted people to see what Rick really was. So I went public. Tanya arranged an interview with a local TV station, Channel 7, the one people actually watch. I sat on my freshly repainted porch, in front of the smashed mailbox I hadn't repaired yet, and told the whole story. The camera zoomed in on the vandalism, the garden, the letter, the zoning proposal with Rick's daughter's name. By the time it aired, it was all over town. The next morning, the mayor's office issued a statement. The city launched a formal review of all zoning proposals on Maple Court. They also opened an ethics investigation into Rick's conduct and the conflict of interest involving his daughter's company. The dominoes fell fast. The 2 other houses bought through Shell LLCs. The city froze further development on them pending investigation. One of the elderly sellers came forward and said Rick offered her cash if she signed quickly and quietly. The silver Tesla guy? Turned out he was a contractor from St. Louis tied to Rick's daughter's firm. He vanished once the story broke. Rick tried to fight back, claimed defamation, accused me of slander. But the pictures, his picture, standing on my porch with the paint bucket, were too much to explain away. He got dropped from the redevelopment proposal. His daughter was suspended from her firm pending review. And my property? The city ruled in my favor. No violations. No code issues. In fact, they fined Rick for filing false complaints and using city services for personal gain. But I wasn't done. I filed a civil suit. Not for money, though I got some. I wanted it on record. I wanted him legally branded for what he did. Harassment, fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress. The settlement was public. He paid out $75,000. I used it to restore the porch, rebuild the rose garden, and install 2 high-def security cameras. The best part? He didn't move out. He stayed. But now, every time he walks out his front door, he sees the house he tried to destroy, still standing, still navy blue, still mine. And he sees neighbors waving to me, bringing over pies, asking about the garden, because now they know who he really is. Rick lost the street he tried to control, and I got my home back, not just the walls and windows, but the pride, the peace, and my wife's memory painted on every inch of it. That was my revenge, and it was worth every second.